Well, if we can take just a minute now, I had something that was arriving. Sam, could you bring it up? Thanks. It wasn't planned this way, but we ran out of time. And, well, let's try this one. Okay. This is my son. Thanks, son.
No problem. How's it going?
They know all about you. Oh, that's Bob, and he was in several of those stories you heard. I said that's the one who now runs a corporation here in town, so he didn't turn out too bad. Yes, that's fine. I'm going to go right into it. So, okay. Today we're going to be talking about consistency. See, is that right? Consistency. We're going to be talking about consistency, and I want to tell you a story that goes right to the heart of this. Years ago, I was in an airport waiting for a plane, and as all of you have done, and there was a woman and a small child there. This little kid about, I think, 3 or 4 years old, right in that and he had a ball. It was like a Nerf ball. And what he was doing was he would look at somebody and then he'd go running up to this ball like he was going to throw it at him. And he'd get right up to him and he'd stop. And of course, people didn't know what he was going to do, and they put up their hands, and he'd laugh, and he'd think it's so funny, and they'd look around and he'd go somebody else, and he'd go running over to them and the same thing. And he never threw it, he'd just act like he was going to. And this was going on and on. His mother was sitting down the end of one of the rows of seats, and she kept saying to him, "Stop that. Cut that out. Get back here. Get over here and sit down. Stop bothering those people. Now you cut that out. Leave them alone. Get over here and sit down." And she went on and on like this, and she never did anything about it. He just kept on having fun. He wasn't paying a bit of attention to her. So, he chose the wrong person. There was a gentleman there, very well dressed, elder, probably around 70 years old, tall, elegant, and he chose him. Bad choice. Very poor thinking and problem solving. He went running up to him, and the man just looked at him. And he came up and he stopped. And I looked at him, got up, took him by the hand, marched him over to where his mother was, said, "Sit down." This little kid sat down in the chair, don't mess around with somebody that big. And then he said, "Stay there." And then he went back over and he sat down, and he just sat there and stared at that kid. And this little kid is sitting in the chair like this, watching that man. He looked at his mom, he looked at the man, he looked at his mom, he looked at the man. And his mother the same way. She looked at him, she looked at the man, looked at her son. What's going on here? Miracle! Well, it wasn't any miracle. It was just that, in this case, one person talked a lot, did nothing. The other one didn't say anything, just acted. One talked, one acted. And the point is that her son knew, I don't need to pay attention to Mom because she just talks. But when somebody acts, you better pay attention to him. And that's all he knew about this man. But evidently, I better pay attention to him. Now, this gets down to the consistency of behavior, because you see, it isn't just enough to be consistent. There are forms of consistency that teach bad patterns. This mother, well, we don't know how consistent she was, because we know that she talked a lot, but I don't know that she ever acted. See, she must have had some rules, because she was talking as though this behavior was unacceptable. Some kind of rule in their family that this behavior is unacceptable. This isn't what I expect of you. I don't know if she had a limit, because she never reached that point. I don't know if maybe it might have been the limit of her patience. Probably that would be the limit. And he knew that until she got up and stormed over to him or something, he could ignore her. But we don't know that, because she didn't show, and she never got to consequences. And the man just decided, "You're acting like a child, I'm going to treat you like a child." Door 2. Mom was essentially saying, you can act like a child and get away with it. The man didn't say you have to act as an adult. He knew better. This kid, with a mom like that, this kid's not going to act like an adult, but at least I can treat him like a child. So consistency has to do with the message that we convey to the child. In this case, the mother's message was, you can ignore me. Now I want to take just a second and summarize these three parts of the discipline system, because they're all necessary. It's a package deal. You can't do just one or two. But they are different in what they do. Rules and limits, expectations and limits, however you want to put it. This is what tells people this is the way things operate around here, whether it's in a home, whether it's in a business, whether it's in the military, whether it's in government. Doesn't matter where it is, any kind of an organization, any time a group of people get together, there are some kind of expectations or rules, written or unwritten, spoken or unspoken, and this is the way we do it, and these are the limits. It tells you what you're supposed to do and when you're supposed to do it. That's so you can take control of how you operate within this particular organization, whatever it is, home or not. And it allows you to become an adult. See, if I know what I'm supposed to do, then I can take responsibility for it. I can be disciplined enough to get it done, and in some cases figure out how to do it. And so I can take charge. I can take control of my consequences. If this doesn't exist, there's no way I can do it. I'm doomed to remain in this dependent state in which I can't figure out how to control things myself. I can't figure out what is predictable and what is not predictable. So I'm stuck waiting for somebody, like Mom maybe, to explode and let me know, okay, now I've got to behave. So this is what we do. When somebody comes in and they say, how do I get my child to so-and-so? I say, well, let's first talk about what. What rules and limits do you have? And what consequences do you have? Because consequences are what tell us or teach us, either way, to pay attention to the rules and the limits. That's all it does. A consequence says you better pay attention to this because if you don't, this will happen. So this is what parents do, and this is what parents do, but this is how parents do it. And this is very different, where this says, this is how we do it here, and this is pay attention to how we do it here. Consistency says, pay attention to me. Because you see, if all of this is in place and you can be ignored, then this doesn't matter. And you can watch children, and they know who they have to pay attention to and who they don't. Very often when you're dealing with a family, you may find out that the kids know that they have to pay attention at school to their teacher, but not at home. Or the other way around. We've got to pay attention at home, but not with the teacher. Kids know, who can I ignore? Who do I have to pay attention to? And that's what consistency teaches us. Now, this mother who was talking a lot and doing nothing, she was consistent in that, and she was inconsistent in that we don't know where it would have gone. But you see, her son already knew, I can ignore you. I don't need to pay attention to you. It's like the highway patrol. I don't know how many of you have ever gotten a ticket, but I'm sure all of you drive on the highways or freeways in your state, and do most of you know the speed limit? Do most of you know what happens if you exceed the speed limit? By, let's say, 20 miles an hour. I had somebody once tell me, yeah, $280 fine. I didn't mean that specific. I just meant, do you understand it? We understand this. Now, tell me this. Why is it that so many people out there are going faster than the speed limit? Is it that nobody knows what the rules are, what the limits are? Is it they don't know that there's any consequence if you do it? No, they know that. What is it that they do know? They know that most of the time, I'm not going to get a ticket. That's why they do it. You know, somebody will say, well, why are you speeding? Well, I was late to work or what. No, you weren't late to work. That wasn't why you were speeding. You were speeding because you were late to work and you thought you'd get away with it. Okay? The reasons people give isn't the reason they do it. Now, if you had somebody who was having a heart attack and you were taking them to the hospital, you might say, the reason I was speeding was because of that. But most of the reasons people give have nothing to do with why they really did it. They did it because they figured the chances are I'll get away with it, and I keep a good eye on the rearview mirror, hopefully I'll make it. Except then there's that cop up there with the radar who gets me coming at him. So consistency, our consistency of experience, folks, is that we don't get caught very often. Does that mean that they don't mean it? Yeah, they mean it. They want us to obey the rules. Does that mean they won't enforce them? Yeah, they'll enforce them. But our perception is they won't get me very often. Now, what do you think your kids believe, or our kids believe, if they don't get caught very often, or they don't suffer the consequences very often? They will ignore us just the way we ignore the rules on the highway. We're not criminals, neither are they. Most of the people out there going fast aren't people that ought to be thrown in jail. They're just people that figure, well, I think this is safe, and so I'm going to do it and hopefully get away with it. Your kids are the same way. They say, I'm going to do it and hopefully what? Get away with it. Now that goes to the core of why this is so important and why the kind of consistency you have makes a difference in what's going to happen. Whether the child is going to pay attention to you and think about this, or whether the child is going to ignore you. Now, once you are consistent in a way that makes the child pay attention, then if they still aren't doing what you want, then it's time to look here. Actually, you can look at the rules and the limits and say, is this clear? Is the problem that they just don't know? Usually that's not it. So generally, what will happen is that there's something about the consequence that doesn't matter to that child. That child just doesn't care about that consequence. So if you're being consistent, then you know it's the consequence that needs to be adjusted. Remember that thermostat? Looks like we need to pump it up a little bit. But if you're not being consistent, then you don't know whether the consequence that you have in place would really work or not. You see, if you got a ticket every single day for speeding, the fine could be $10. And you'd pretty much stop speeding. If you had to go down and go to court and pay the $10 fine every time you were speeding, how many times would you speed if it was just $10? You might, if it was a real emergency and you said, I'm willing to sacrifice 5 hours of my time to save 10 minutes. But generally you wouldn't. You simply wouldn't. That's how important consistency is. And when I do a seminar, I don't care if it's for 20 people or 200 people, if I say, what's the biggest problem you're having as a parent in discipline, given these three parts of the system? You know what 98% of the people say? Consistency. They know that's their problem. Some of them just aren't sure how to solve it. So we're going to talk a little bit about how consistency can be working against you. I had a mother came in, and they were doing quite well, but she brought up a couple of things. One of them, she said, I have a problem with my kids in that I get them to do stuff. It isn't that she doesn't get them to do it. She says, but I tell them 6 or 7 or 8 times, and finally, you know, yell at them or go in and get them to do it. And so I said, well, all right, what's your concern? She says, I'm sick to death of having to tell them and tell them and tell them before they do it. So I said, fine, we're going to go through 2 steps with you, and at the end of the 2 steps, which may take about 3 weeks, you're going to be able to get them to do things without saying it at all. And she looked at me like I was nuts. And I said, no, follow me on this because it will work. And by the way, this will work easily 90% of the time. You'll have a few that really have gotten to the point where they are so cantankerous or defiant or whatever that it takes a little more time to work it out. But step 1 is, I said, from now on, because she did enforce it. She always went and made sure. I said, from now on, you say it once. Just once. And then you go make them do it. If you can't go right away, don't keep saying it. If you're busy and it's going to be 15 minutes before you can get in and make them do it, you still just say it once. Because what you want them to understand is that I've said it once and now the clock is running. And I might be there in 5 seconds and I might be there in 5 minutes. But the clock is running and I am going to come do something about it. So you better start paying attention to me when I say it once. Unless, of course, you don't care about the consequences, in which case I'll crank the consequences up until you do care. So now, in a matter of a couple of weeks, she is going to get to the point where consistently she only says it once. And then the consequence happens. And now they have to decide, do I want to control my consequences? Or do I want Mom to control my consequences? Which do I want? I can do it, or she can do it. Now we've got them thinking the right way about the problem. I said the next thing you do is you tell them from now on, you're expected to do this, and I'm not going to tell you. Now, in order to do that, you've got to be certain that you have something in place. Does anybody know what that is? It's the same thing that works with the highway patrol. How do you know what you're expected to do? There is a limit. So, if it's clean your room, then it is clean your room by such and such a time. Now that time occurs whether you do anything more or not. Now the point is, I am not going to tell you anymore. I am not going to remind you anymore. I am not going to nag you anymore. It is your responsibility, and I expect you to carry it out, and I expect you to be disciplined enough to get it done. And if you've got some problems in doing that, I expect you to figure those out. I am not going to take responsibility for it any longer. I am going to hold you accountable, but I'm not going to take responsibility anymore. You must do it on your own now. And if you do, you will control your consequences. And if you don't, I will. And if the consequences are such that you don't want them, pretty soon you've got the child being sure, I better get my room cleaned by dinner time or whatever, so that I can control my consequences and I don't have Mom or Dad stepping back in. That's what it takes to get a child to the point where you don't say it at all. Some things you may need to say one time because they don't happen on a regular basis. So you can't set them up this way. But if you want something done on a regular basis, I had a situation with my kids. I said, when you get your chores done, whatever chores you have during the week, you get them done by Friday night. Anything you have not done by Friday night, you will then have to do Saturday morning before you do anything else. That was the rule. The limit was Friday night. I didn't take any responsibility for it. It's up to you to make sure that during the week you discipline yourself, you figure out when to get these things done based upon the rest of your schedule, you get them done, and then you're free to do whatever you want on Saturday. If you don't do that, then on Saturday the first consequence is you do that before you do anything else. And then I never said anything to them all week. And if it came up Friday and there were chores that weren't done, I didn't come in and say, well, you know, it's Friday, you're running out of time. That's nagging. That's thinking for him again. You say, well, I've got a kid with a poor memory. Then if he's got a poor memory, he better learn how in life to get around that. Because if he's got a poor memory, the boss isn't going to call him up every morning at 6:30 and say, are you out of bed? You know, are you getting a shower? Are you getting into work? He's just going to say, don't bother to come. So the reasons why we keep stepping back in may be good reasons, but they're not reasons to step back in. They're things the child's got to solve himself. Some point in life, nobody's going to be responsible for him anymore. Unless, of course, they lock him up in jail. And I don't think we want that. So I told him, Friday night, have it done. Otherwise, Saturday morning, and I don't expect to have to say anything to you. You just get up and go do the stuff you didn't get done. So we're having dinner on Friday night, and my son says, not this one. My son said, Dad, is it okay if I go water skiing tomorrow morning? And I said, sure, why not? Well, he was about 15 years old. If he wanted to go water skiing, he didn't need to ask me. I mean, it wasn't something that the kind of an activity he needed permission for. If you want to go water skiing with his friends, go water skiing. Now, you see, the deal is I knew why he asked the question. He asked the question because he hadn't cut the front lawn yet. Front lawn was his responsibility. And what he was really saying was, is it okay if I go water skiing and don't cut the grass? Now, he didn't ask that. He just said, is it okay if I go water skiing? And then, of course, tomorrow when he goes water skiing and he comes back, I say, hey, what about the lawn? He said, well, you told me I could go. You ever had that one pulled on you? See? You told me. So I just looked at him and I said, sure, you can go. And then I said, don't forget the grass. And it was kind of like, he brightened up and then, don't forget the grass. And he said, well, but Dad, we are going at 9 o'clock. You see, now you have to understand something. For those of you that haven't had a teenager, you got to sleep in till 8:30 on Saturday morning so you're physically fit to go water skiing all day. Can't get up. And I looked at him and I said, 9 o'clock? He said, yeah. Like, gee, Dad, there's just no time. I said, that's all right. Lawn cuts really good at 6 o'clock. Hey, I'm not bailing you out. This is your problem. It's your responsibility. If you didn't work things out and figure out how to get this done and take care of it, don't try to dump it back on me. Because if you do, which is what he was trying to do, I said, fine. If you're going to act like a child, I'll treat you like a child, and I will tell you, cut the grass first thing tomorrow morning before you go water skiing. Next question. That's it. Did I feel guilty? Not in the least. Why? I had given him complete control. I had given him just as much control over his life as I have over mine. And he hadn't handled it well. Why should I feel guilty about that? He could have controlled the whole situation. I don't set it up so they can't control it. I set it up so they can control it, so that then I can hold them accountable. You didn't control it. Don't come to me. You're behind in your schoolwork. You're grounded till it's caught up. That was under your control. Well, I've been real busy the last couple of weeks. Fine. I guess you need some more time to get caught up. Yeah, but we were going camping this weekend. Not until you're caught up. Obviously, if you've been that busy, you need to take some time now and get caught up on your schoolwork. The logic is, you figure it out, because if you let me figure it out, weird Dad will get in again and you won't like the results. But I'm not going to feel guilty and I'm not going to take back responsibility. I gave it to you, I leave it with you. Had a family come in, and this is one that we've been working with recently, and they were going to go into the impact program. And here's an example of the kind of inconsistency that sets you up, because they were having a real problem with this girl, and Dad was the problem. Mom was not. Dad was. And she had sneaked out of the house. She was told she was grounded, couldn't go anyplace. Or, not grounded, she just couldn't go out that evening. Her friends were going out, it was too late. It was like 9 o'clock. This is a 15-year-old girl. You can't go out at 9 o'clock. So what did she do? She did what any well-mannered, obedient, young 15-year-old girl would do. She climbed out the window. You don't tell me what to do. Now that is defiance, folks. So she climbed out the window. So she came strolling back in about midnight. They'd, in the meantime, discovered that she was gone, and they'd been working with me. So Mom says, I'm not going to chase her around. She's on the base here. You know, they had a pretty good idea where she was. You know, I'm not chasing her down. But when she comes home, they said, now, you're grounded for a week. And then she came up with the poor, oh, gee, and I'm grounded, and I'm going to miss out on everything. My whole social life of my entire is going to crash around my shoulder, and it's all your fault. And when Dad came, he says, well, okay, what you can do is you can clean the house tomorrow, and then you're ungrounded. What do you think happens? Sure, she went right back to being the way she was. Inconsistency. Now, there's two kinds here. One is the inconsistency between the parents, because originally he went along with the other and then he backed out on it. So there's the inconsistency between them. She said this, Dad finally comes up with this. There's the inconsistency he has himself, in that originally he agreed to one thing and then he turned around and changed it. And I'm not saying you can't change a consequence, but when you change a consequence, you better explain to that child exactly why you've decided that you're going to do this instead of that. And it's got to be on the basis that I have decided that that may have been, well, I'm not going to get into it because I could set you up for the wrong kind of an answer there. But you need to know that if you change that consequence, it's got to be for a good reason. Which is why it behooves you to think very carefully about what you say and not be so quick to fly off that. One thing I recommend is if you've got a difficult situation and you aren't good at thinking up consequences right off the bat, do what I do. You got a tough situation and say, you're grounded until we've talked about this. And then I go take some time to think about it and cool down. But he backed out on it. Guess what happened the next week? She did something, again, in a matter of, it was within a week's time. And he said, okay, you're going on the impact program. And she was this, oh, gee whiz. And Dad says, okay, not this time, but next time. Sure, next time, Dad. And the next time, and the next time, and the next time. Why should I believe you? You're a bag of wind. You talk and you don't act. And she knew it. And finally, we got to the point where it got so bad that Dad finally said, okay, because Mom said, if you don't stop, we're packing up and leaving. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. She put her foot down, and he backed off, and he let her basically say, this is what's going to happen, young lady. And it's, this is going to happen or else. You better either act like an adult or you're going to be treated like a child, because no more door 3. Dad isn't in the picture anymore. That's not going to happen. Now let's talk about another one. I had a couple come in to me. I used to be family advocacy program at Camp Pendleton. And I was the head of the program there. We had a family come in, a young Marine, his wife, because he had been disciplining their 3-year-old daughter with a belt. Now, this was not an abusive dad. Let me get something clear here. This was a concerned father. He was not hitting her hard enough to create any welts or anything else. He just, and I asked him, I said, well, why do you use that? He said, well, that's what my folks used with me, and so that's what I used, and this was their first child, and he just figured this is the way you do it. And there was nothing more to it than that. And he didn't do it in anger, he didn't hurt her, but somebody found out about it, and bingo, they're in my office. So I said, all right, when you do it? And he said, well, every time she misbehaves, and it wasn't for every misbehavior, but it was for certain things that they really wanted her to stop. And I said, then what happens? He says, well, then she generally stops for a couple of weeks. That's pretty typical. 3-year-old, they remember for a while, then they forget. No. I said, and you do it every time? Yeah. And she stops every time? He said, yep. And I said, okay, you're here because we've got to solve the problem of the belt. I said, I want you to go home and do something. The next time your daughter misbehaves, I want you to take her and put her in a chair and tell her to just sit there and give her about 5, maybe 10 minutes, but not very long. A 3-year-old, 10 minutes is like an eternity. So generally the old rule, 1 minute per year. I would say about 5 minutes for this. So I said, put her there for 5 minutes, then come back and get her and say, do you understand why you're here? You're not supposed to do that. Yeah, get her to just say yes. Don't worry about how much she understands, because you're going to repeat this and repeat this and repeat this until she does. And so he said, yeah. I said, when she says yes, then say okay, and let her go back to playing. I said, and do that every time. And then I want you to see me next week. So they came back in, and I said, well, have you been doing what I said? He said, yes. And I said, how's it working? He said, great. She stops whatever she's doing. And I said, okay. We went on for about 3 more weeks of this, and he kept reporting back things were going fine. I said, now I want you to understand something. It was not the belt that was making her behave. It was the consistency of using it that was making her behave, because that's what got her to pay attention to you. I said, what I hope you understand now is that it's your consistency that makes your discipline work with your daughter, not the belt. You don't need the belt. You can have consequences that will work with her. I mean, it's got to be something that works with this particular child, but they do not have to be abusive, either verbally, emotionally, physically, whatever. If you'll be consistent and you find what she pays attention to in terms of the consequence, she already will be paying attention to you. It will work. Now that's where consistency makes this work, is understanding that it's what the child decides about you. Do I need to pay attention to you or not? Then the only question is, what do you do that concerns me? And what is it that I either want to have happen to me in terms of a consequence or don't want to have happen to me? And when you choose those consequences and you've got a child who says to themselves, I have to pay attention to you, then they will do it. And pretty soon, what you've got is a child who says, in order to control this, because it is now very what? Predictable. The consistency makes this very predictable. In order to control this and predict exactly what's going to happen, this is what I have to do. And so what you do is you begin to get automatically the child accepting responsibility and being self-disciplined, even though they don't really want to. They want to do this. They want to be in charge of their own life. They want to, I want to, you know, Eric got that one? I want to do it myself. Why don't you leave me alone? They're very much into, from the time they're small. This is not something you need to teach them. The only part of this that you focus on is teaching them to do it in a way that makes sense. Because some of them make their own decisions and they're brain dead. And so that's why that phrase comes up. Why don't you think before you do something? Or that's a good one. You ever asked, when are you going to think? What's the child supposed to? That's one of those questions you don't ask. Like the cracks, you know, why didn't you clean up your room? When are you going to think? What's the child supposed to say? September? January? I don't know, when. When am I supposed to think? Or when are you going to learn? That's as good a one. Maybe that's even dumber. When are you going to learn? Next year? How many times do I have to tell you? 300, 350, 400? I mean, what if they gave you those answers? That's what you've asked. They know you don't want to answer. That's when they come up with, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Then they go out and their friends say, well, what was going on? You say, oh, my parents were asking some of those dumb questions again. They know they're talking to a banana. That's why they don't give you a reasonable answer. What's the sense of giving an answer? The question is idiotic. Okay, so consistency. This is a package deal. What's important in terms of training families is that they understand how much this makes the rest of it work. If they're inconsistent, why should anybody pay attention to them? We don't pay attention to people who are inconsistent. If you have somebody that promises you things, promises, and never follows through with them, what do you begin to do? You don't pay attention to them anymore. And you got a friend who says, could I borrow $5? I'll give it back to you tomorrow. And that now amounts to something short of the national debt. And you know they never remember to give it back. I put it nicely. They never remember. They choose, that's like my kids. I forgot. What happened to that $5? Oh, I forgot. Good, well then, I won't put you in that predicament anymore. No more $5. If you're going to act like a child, I don't care if you're 40 years old, you act like a child, I'm going to treat you like a child. The consequence is, don't borrow money from me. Because you don't take responsibility and get self-disciplined about paying it back. So these are the two things that we have to teach a child. And as long as we make it a package deal that you can control as much of your life as you will take responsibility for, we're okay. Then just do what you want. And when you don't, then you won't. Okay, now I want to take just a couple of minutes and deal with a matter of defiance, because a couple of people ask, well, what about a defiance situation? And there are things that are defiance that haven't reached the point of an impact program where you can begin to teach a child, don't mess with me anymore. Generally, defiance comes along because a child has been getting away with stuff and they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they get to the point where they are doing what they want and figuring, I will get away with it, you won't do anything anyway. Remember, defiance is when the child says, you don't make the rules anymore. Disobedience says, you make the rules, I try to get out from under them. That's disobedience. Defiance is, you don't make the rules. I had a mother come in, and she had about a 15-year-old daughter, and this gal was a knockout. I mean, whew. And Mom said, we've got a little problem. I'd been seeing them for several weeks. And she came and she said, we've got a real problem. And I said, what's that? She said, well, her daughter just came home with a pair of designer jeans. Now, these were the kind that left nothing to the imagination. They looked like they'd been spray painted on. This was not part of their family dress code. And the daughter knew it. So what had she done? She'd gone down, she bought them, put them on their charge account, and then she wore them to a party. So when she came home with them on, I can't take them back, I've already worn them. And these were $80 jeans. Mom said, what do we do? And I said, well, now, remember, when I give people a suggestion, this is just an idea. I hope it will make you creative, but don't necessarily follow it. The idea is to get across, what are we talking about here? So I said, here would be my suggestion. Go home, get that pair of pinking shears that you have, go up to her room, take the designer jeans, which are now in the drawer because she was at school, take the designer jeans, cut them up into little pieces, and leave them on her bed. And then leave. Don't say anything, just leave them there. When she comes home and finds them, believe me, she will say something. And it will probably go something like, Mother, what'd you do to my jeans? And so the mother says, well, honey, evidently you really wanted those. We figured when you bought them that you must really want them, so if you want them, you can keep them. The only problem is, you see, you can't wear them. And since you didn't seem to be paying attention to me on that, well, I just wanted to make sure that you didn't forget when you see them that you're not to wear them. And by the way, you owe me $80. Remember that thing about, why should I bail if I'm not in your boat? Hey, part of the consequence is you decided to buy the jeans. You pay for them. You didn't get my permission. And you didn't ask for it because you knew you wouldn't get it. So you don't pay for the jeans. You say, well, what if she doesn't have any money? Well, washing the car at $5 a shot, will probably get us through it. Or maybe doing windows. That's a real good one. You live someplace where there are a lot of windows to be cleaned, honey, you can clean the windows. And it's not so much per hour because they'll only clean one pane an hour. It's you clean this many windows and that counts for this many dollars. You make sure that they can't get out from under the consequence. You put it in such a way that they have to produce. Okay, questions?
My 14-year-old comes to me and says, what are you doing? So I explain a little bit to him. And they say, for 14 years, you've, excuse my language, you've messed up as a parent.
Yeah.
So now I have to suffer for it.
Yeah.
You're going to take all my stuff away from me. You're going to make my life hell because of my lifestyle. You know, you brought me up to this point, and now you're going to change everything. So now I have to suffer because you're lousy parenting.
Okay. This is interesting. I had one family that was coming in, and they got really upset about having to come in and pay the fees that I charge for this. And the dad was writing out the check one time and said, boy, this and his wife said, why don't we have her pay for it? And I said, that's a great idea. And they went home and they said, honey, as long as we've got to go in for all of this to help straighten things out with you, you're going to pay for it. What did that do? Did that increase her incentive to help get this thing solved so she'd get out from under paying it? Yeah. They came back in and they said, she was flabbergasted. Now, let me explain two things about what you're specifically addressing. One is that this system is going to give the child a better deal than they've had under the old one, because the old one was full of chaos. Maybe they were getting their way, but the way they were getting it was not healthy and was not good for them. I don't say they're going to like it in the beginning, but after a while, when they find out how much more control they have and how much more much you can turn over to them in terms of control. If they will take responsibility for it. See, that's the only problem. Take responsibility for it. You can have it. I'll get out of your life. They will, by and large, support it. Most kids will fall right into it. And the other part of it is when you come home and do this, this is not a frontal attack. You don't come rolling through the front door with a Sherman or a Abraham vehicle or whatever. You don't just blow them apart. You walk in and you say, oh, by the way, weren't you supposed to clean your room today? Now, well, go do it now. Well, I'm watching the TV now. Well, I know, but you're supposed to do your room, so go do that. It was supposed to be done. See, there's got to have been a limit. If there wasn't a limit, can't do that. But, well, as the 14-year-old, your payoff is that things become predictable and that you start to get more control over stuff and you don't have to manipulate and fight for it and you don't have to put up with your parents blabbing at you all the time. Finally, they will shut up and leave you alone, but they hold you accountable. I'm not going to tell you anymore, but I'm going to hold you accountable. If you don't do it, then I'm going to step back in. I'm not going to talk to you again. I'm going to do something. The payoff for the 14-year-olds, first of all, that this comes in and you deal with things that are minor issues at first, not the kind of thing the child will go to general quarters with you about, not the kind of thing that they're going to, a full-blown power struggle, little stuff that they won't fight over. And they begin to get the idea that something has changed about you. I have lots of parents that come back in and they'll say, you're different. I mean, after 1 week, they say, what is it, Mom? Or what is it, Dad? You're different. They're not quite sure what's, and that's why you don't bother to tell them what's going on. You don't sit down and give them a lecture about how we're going to change now. You just do it. They'll pick up on the fact that you're doing it. I've had others, after a few weeks, they're headed down to see me and they say, are you going to see that counselor again? But they don't say it in an angry way. They really don't. This does work, and it, see, they want control. That's what they want. If they have to fight for it, they'll fight for it. If they can get it without fighting for it, most of them will do it that way. But what you say is, in order to avoid the power struggles, you've got to do these two things. Most people think you're having the power struggle about getting them to do this. You aren't. You're having the power struggle because you're saying, I'm going to refuse to let you control things. That's where the power struggle is. You say, hey, I'll let you control whatever you're capable of doing, but I'll hold you accountable. And if you don't do it right, then you'll suffer a consequence. So then it's, well, I've got the control if I'll do it right. It makes sense to them. You have to have a pretty brain-dead kid not to figure out that this is a good deal for him. Go ahead.
My question was, I married a woman who had a 3-month-old child, and he was a son, and his father died in a pilot crash. His father's a pilot in the military, and as a result of that, for the last 18 years, he's been receiving VA and Social Security.
Right.
Well, he knows that, and we've been taking the VA and Social Security and put it in a trust fund and investing and all of that kind of stuff. Well, he's been wanting a car since he was about 16 years old, and I said, no, not until you finish your first year of college and bring me some decent grades home. Great kid, great everything. Well, about 2 weeks ago, he said to me, out of anger, he says, well, you're not my daddy, and you can't tell me what to do, and I'm going to take my money and do what I want to do with it, and I'm going to buy me a car. Now, and my question to you is, can you tell me what I should have done, and then I'm going to tell you what I did?
Ooh. I'll tell you what, why don't you tell me what you did, because I'll tell you right now, I already know the answer I'm going to give you. It won't change one bit based upon what you did.
Exactly what I did.
Okay.
I went and got the checkbook, and I wrote him a check for $300,000. Then I took the check for $300,000 with his name on it, and I gave it to him. And then I told him to go to his computer, because he has this widget computer thing, and I says, now what I want you to do is, I says, I want you to go from 1 year to the present. I said, because you owe me a few coins here. I says, I want you to go from 1 year to the present and add up all the babies and the And so, and I said, and then I want you to pack your bags, pack all your little things, and then get out. And he decided quickly that that was not what he really intended to do. He just wanted me to give him enough money for a car. Okay. But as a result of that, he tore up the check, and he's still driving the old car. You know, because I wasn't going to buy him a Beamer.
Good. Good. You brought it home to him. Okay,
Okay.
you want this? There's the consequence.
Okay, now that's part one. Part two is there's another child, a child that my wife and I had out of marriage. That's the child that we had. Okay, now Granville, of course, I had him at 3 months, so he is my child. You feed anybody long enough, they'll start looking like you. So the reality is he's a very, very handsome young man.
That
but
goes without saying, but you said it anyway.
you better hurry up and know it. But the agreement my wife and I made was, when we got married, I said, now, if we ever have children, I can't give this child X amount of dollars and say this is from your father, and not give this child anything. So I just want to know, I know what I'm going to do, but how do I deal with that?
Okay.
Or do your do your thinking and problem and widgeting and gidgeting get into things like that?
Well, I don't know that they would, except that in this case, they have.
Okay.
So let me give you a little background. My oldest son is not my son. His father was a Navy pilot and was killed before he was born. And so I'm the only dad he's ever known. And just like your son, there was a monthly check that came in. And I decided,
They get higher and higher and higher and higher and higher.
Well, I decided at the beginning that check, the only way, I couldn't make up for his dad being gone. And no amount of money was going to do it. So I made a decision that I was not going to put that into some bank account and at some point say, here, this replaces your father. Because the only father he was going to have, as far as I knew, was me.
Right.
So what we did was we used the money each month to provide a lifestyle that we couldn't have provided on my Navy income alone. But with that, we could. At one point in time, we put him in a private school because we felt that the public school was not doing the job right. But that money was used all along, and as his 2 brothers and 2 sisters came along, of course, everybody, in a sense, was benefiting from that money. But to have said, well, let's deprive you all these years so later on you can have this check, I didn't think made sense. We lived in better neighborhoods because of that. He wore better clothes. It went to things that were part of his lifestyle at that point in time. And I have to add one other thing. See, I had no guarantee that he would grow up and be alive to receive that money. So what if I had been saving it all these years and saying, no, do without, and at 14 he gets killed in an auto accident or something? Then what do I do with the money? I wouldn't want to spend it on me. I'd want to just give it away. So my decision was, oh, I'm sorry. The thought of that money being used by me, it would just be intolerable.
Yeah.
So my decision was that the only way I can know that that money is benefiting him in the way that I think in the long run will do him the most good is on a day-to-day basis to provide him with what his dad can't provide him because he's not there. And that was a style of living that was going to mean the most to him when he grew up, because the car is going to be junk in 5 years. But if I can provide him with a way of living that gives him a different sense of his identity and his well-being and his self-image, that's going to last forever. So that's how I invested it. Now, I don't know what your answer is, but that was mine.
Well, basically what I did was, Yvonne and I both were working. I was in the military, and she was a counselor in high school. So I just told her, I said, we have 2 children, so we just split it down the middle. But and now he understands. But that really hurt me when he says, well, I'm going to take the money that I said, boy, listen, I'm the one that walked the halls with you at night and rocked you and all of that, and the doctor and all that. So I tell you what, you take these coins and go on and do what you want to do. But then once he began to think about it, and said, wait a minute, you know, this isn't making good bad sense. You know, what's the thing? You know, yes, I'll have a Beamer, but what about this old guy who took me to first, second, and third, and fourth, and fifth
That's
grade,
the whole point.
and fed me what's that stuff when they get real sick? Ampicillin and shots and all of that kind of stuff, you know.
Castor oil.
Castor oil and all of that. So, but we got it together before.
Good.
But it was a difficult time for one point because his mother, she was in Nut City. She just didn't know what to do. You know, like most. I mean.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.